So these brothers are about to go to sleep only to wake up in the next morning and find out that their beautiful garden has been destroyed into ashes. So who was behind it and why? Follow me. So for the purpose of this video, let's call them brothers, and it all started with their father, who we'll just call Father. Father is a very well respected man within his community, and he happens to own a big garden. A garden that has lots of trees, and these trees produces varieties of fruits where he and his family benefits, and likewise the poor and needy from his community benefit as well. But then one day, Father was no more. He has answered the call of his creator, and upon hearing the news of the passing of Father, everyone within the community was so sad, knowing how good of a man Father was. But guess who was not sad with Father passing? Brothers, because they thought Father was doing way too much by sharing the product of his garden with others. They believe it's not some kind of a public property, so it's just for them to enjoy alone. That's some whole level of greediness. So after Father's passing, they took over the garden just for themselves and not allowing anyone to have anything from it. So one day, it's time for harvest, as the trees in the garden have produced a lot of fruits, and these fruits are ready to be harvested. So brothers held a meeting within themselves that they are going to go to the garden the next morning to harvest every single fruit, leaving nothing behind, so as no poor or needy will come knocking on their door asking for any of it. But they made a huge mistake. They forgot to say Inshallah, like Inshallah we are going to harvest everything, and this is going to affect them later on. So at night they all went to sleep, and fast forward to the next morning. In the early hours of that morning, they began calling each other so as to go carry on their task of harvesting every single fruit in the garden. So they walked quietly and slowly to the garden so as no one will hear their footsteps as they are heading towards the garden. But to their greatest surprise, upon reaching the garden was destroyed completely to ashes. There was no single tree that was again standing on that garden. All the fruits have been destroyed and spoiled. Not even a single beneficial thing can again be found on that garden. All gone, all destroyed overnight. So upon realizing this, they were like, are we lost or something? What place is this? Because they actually thought they headed somewhere else instead of their own garden. They still couldn't believe that this is their beautiful and beloved garden. But in the end, they realized that, yeah, it is indeed our garden, just that it has been destroyed by God knows what. Then one of them, who happened to be like the more pious amongst them, told the others, instead of standing there and looking in shock, shouldn't you be saying Subhanallah in a situation like this? Then and only then they were like Subhanallah, Subhanallah. So they actually remembered Allah now that they were in the middle of a tragedy. Nice play. Then they actually started blaming each other. This one would be like, it's all your fault. Another one would be like, you didn't do your job well. Another one would be like, instead of that, you should have done this. They were just throwing blames at each other. But in the end, they all returned to their senses and they were like, Ya Allah, we have been transgressors, we have gone beyond your limits, and we do hope you replace it with something much better for us. So sad. I know you must be wondering how it happened overnight and who was behind it. Well, it was a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their greediness and ungratefulness, to serve as a lesson to them and anyone with similar mindset. And then to round up the story, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَلِكَ الْعَذَابُ وَلَعَذَابُ الْآخِرَةِ أَكْبَرُ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. Such is the punishment in life, because obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is punishing them for being ungrateful servants. Then he says the punishment of the hereafter is way bigger, if only they knew. And the end. So what are the lessons we can derive from this story? Firstly, don't be greedy. Always share what you have with others. No matter how little it is, share it with someone, because there is definitely a blessing in sharing. Secondly, whenever a calamity, tragedy, or anything bad befalls you, always submit your affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can say dhikrs like Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, Subhanallah, etc. Thirdly, whenever you aim to do anything in the future, always say Inshallah, because one thing is definitely for sure: the future is not in our hands, but rather in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 4. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can decide to test you with anything, good or bad. But one thing is for sure: those that are grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will increase upon their blessings. And those that are ungrateful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send tragedies their way to serve as a reminder to them to return back to the path of Allah. Finally, and this is very important, raising a child is not just the duty of his parents, but rather a responsibility upon the community at large. If there is a child within the community that is a bad influence, it will affect you and your children. So it is a collective responsibility of a community at large to raise its children. And as always, follow for more stories, and inshallah I will see you on the next one. Wassalamu alaikum.